You'll see some of the speakers we've had in the past. We view these BLCs as an opportunity to thank our donors. It's like a benefit we give them, but we also view it as an opportunity to bring new people into the Campagna Center so you can learn about us, our mission, and understand what goes on in the white building on South Washington Street, because a lot of people don't know what goes on here. Tammy Mann, our CEO and president, will give a few comments after our speaker, just to kind of give you a sense of what our mission is and what we've got cooking for 2018 and in the future. I want to thank Dave Millard in the back and Addison Young for being our sponsor for today's presentation. And I want you to save the date. Our next BLC will be May 22nd. You've got papers on your chair. Jane Cobb, who's the executive director of the SCC Historical Society. There is a historical society for the securities industry. So it should be pretty interesting. So I need my notes, excuse me. So let me first introduce to you Jim Vanderhyde. We all know him. Many of us saw him on Morning Joe this morning. Jim is co-founder and CEO of Axios, which in the Greek means worthy. As you know, they are a leading edge media company, and they specialize in business, technology, and politics. Do you need to take that? Prior to that, he is the co-founder and CEO of Politico, and that revolutionized digital media with regards to policy and reporting. Prior to that, he was a reporter on the presidency and politics for the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post. He was named one of the leading, he's by Vanity Fair. Let me put the glasses
Leading
on.
national BSers.
No. Was named one of the 100 leading information thinkers in America. And in 2015 was named the editor of the year for the National Press Foundation. It's my privilege to introduce to you Jim Vanderhyde and his topic today, the evolution of media and what challenges and opportunities await us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. I'll just talk briefly and then we can just do Q&A about anything you want to know about media, politics. We just got back from Silicon Valley. We met with the CEO and founder of Snapchat, of LinkedIn, met with the leaders of Facebook. And we spent a lot of time talking about politics. But we also spend a lot of time at Axios covering other topics of consequence, so business, technology, energy, healthcare. We're big believers in truth and that facts actually matter, even though a lot of people don't believe them anymore. And that's what Axios is dedicated to doing. My career, in some ways, is holds a trajectory of what's happened to media. I mean, I thought I was going to be a political writer my whole life. I was at the Washington Post, and I'm covering the presidency and writing about whatever I want to write. It's 2006, and then our entire industry blows up, and you see everyone gravitating towards the web. You see cable TV taking off, and then anybody who really cared about politics starts watching cable TV instead of the nightly news, and we wanted to be part of that change. And so when we started Politico, most of these technologies that we're all addicted to today didn't exist. The iPhone launched right about when we launched. There really wasn't much of a Google, there wasn't much Facebook, there was no Snapchat, there was no Instagram, there was no LinkedIn for content, there was no Huffington Post, there was no BuzzFeed. Like all of these topics, these things that we read today, they didn't exist. And so we were sort of there at the beginning of this big explosion where you went from having essentially 5 news sources, maybe, your 3 big networks, the New York Times, and then maybe your local newspaper, where there was this community of essentially shared facts. The conservatives felt like it was a little too liberal, but for the most part, everyone kind of agreed that if you look at these sources, what they're reporting is true. Then along comes cable TV, and along comes social media. And I can't stress enough how much the combination of those two things have profoundly changed politics, have changed media, have changed culture. And one of the big reasons is you go back a decade ago, if you had an opinion, especially if you had like an absurd opinion, you couldn't really share it with anyone. You could lie about it at a bar, you could holler at the TV, but there's nothing you could really do with it. Now you can turn on the TV and you can have someone fuel your rage 24/7, on the left on MSNBC, on the right on Fox, and then you can jump on all these social media platforms and you can find hundreds, if not thousands, if not 10,000s of people that no matter how stupid your opinion is, they will agree with you. They'll follow you, they'll friend you. And so it unleashed kind of the animal spirit of anybody who had an opinion that they wanted to share. And it really did shape everything to its core. It basically created tribes of all of us. You sort of went to your left, you went to the right, or you got the hell out of the game. You stopped voting, you stopped watching, you stopped reading, because it was just too much. I call those the smart people. The rest of us sat in. So we're able to build a business about politics back then. And our theory then was take advantage of the web, take advantage of the fact that people want to be armed with more knowledge about politics, go deeper, be more analytical, write actually the way people talk as opposed to the stilted, weird way that we as reporters wrote. And it was super successful. So then you fast forward 10 years, that's a successful company, and you think about, okay, what problem needs to be solved? And I look around, and I'll joke a lot about things, but like, I'm really scared. I'm scared when I look around and I see 60, 70% of people don't even know what truth is anymore. They don't know what to trust. They feel like the media is biased, or they don't even know where they're getting their media from. I mean, the number of people I meet that say, I'm like, where'd you read that? I read that, that was Facebook. I'm like, Facebook's not actually Facebook is a platform where you might be getting news. Did it come from InfoWars? Did it come from the Wall Street Journal? Massive difference. And so our belief is that we have to somehow in the media regain the trust of the news consumer. You do that by not having an opinion page. You do that by trying to arm them with what is new and why does it matter. And so the architecture of everything that we write is done in that format. What is new? What is real? Why does it matter? And then give the reader the option to go deeper. And that's actually how we all communicate. That's how we talk. And so the formulas resonated very well, and we've been lucky that we've been successful for the first year. And it's fun to get out of just doing politics, because the other thing I don't think people pay enough attention to is that you can't put technology back in a box. And what technology is going to do is it's going to change every job in every industry way faster than people realize. And that what's going to happen is you're going to have a collision of politics, technology, and then what we call like media consumption, like how do you consume and disseminate information. It's in the collision of those three things that all new conflict will come, all new ideas will come, all new businesses will come. But in that, there's going to be a lot of pain. There's going to be a lot of suffering. Because what people don't fully appreciate is that if you're running a publicly traded company, you have a fiduciary responsibility to drive shareholder value. What that means is you have to do everything you can in a capitalistic society to drive profitability. Well, that's going to make, you're going to look at these technologies, all of which can replace human activity in almost every sphere, and you're going to adopt it. I don't care what they say publicly, they will adopt it, unless there's a massive cultural shift where we value what a business is doing for its people versus its profitability, and that's not going to happen in the short term. A lot of destruction will come. And so for everything that happened in the Midwest and the manufacturing crisis that we all talk about and know about, I think that's small ball in comparison to what's about to hit us. And the thought experiment I always tell people to do is go in any busy block, go in Old Town, go hit King Street, and just walk one block and look in every single storefront, and then ask yourself, could a robot right now do that job better than that person doing it more efficiently? And if not now, could they soon? The answer in almost every one of those is yes. Like we're way, especially with artificial intelligence about to come onto the scene, right? As we move from what now is like a 4G network, which is what all our cell phones operate on, we're about to go to 5G. And I don't think people, 5G, what is that? Like, you should pay a lot of attention to it, because what it's going to do is it is going to power technology at a scale that we can't even imagine. It's going to allow artificial intelligence to do all the things that we used to read about in sci-fi books that now are true. They can happen. And so, to me, it's really important that government, us as voters, us as just individual citizens, are aware of that. You can adapt to it, you can make changes, but if we keep going through another decade of political dysfunction and we don't adjust, there is a country that is adjusting to a lot of this. It's called China. If you look at what China is doing in terms of artificial intelligence, if you look at how China is expanding its infrastructure in every corner of the globe, if you look at who stepped into the void when we say we don't like free trade anymore, we don't want to be a global player, well, guess who wants to? Guess who's saying they want to? The Chinese. And so there's nothing written in the sort of global constitution that we're forever the dominant nation. I think we will be. I think there's attributes we have that make us much more appealing than the Chinese or India, but it's not. If you keep toiling away and keep doing nothing, and I say that's essentially what Washington has done for a long time, we're going to have a rude awakening. And so, as I sit there and think about media, like what I hope is, and the thing when we were in California, we talked to students at USC and UCLA, and one of the things I always say is we always want to. We've definitely gotten into a habit of a country where we just blame the system or blame government. I kind of blame everyone. And I think that people have to take more ownership. As a news consumer, if you care about news, take a second and figure out where the hell did that come from? Can I trust it? Is that site, is that paper, is that thing I'm watching, is it something that's been reputable for a long period of time that gives you a high degree of confidence that something you're consuming now is probably truth? If not, if you're consuming it and then you're reacting to it, that's on you. That's not Facebook's fault. That's not Rachel Maddow's fault. It's on you. And so my hope is that people take advantage of what should be, like that's the damn thing. This should be information nirvana. There will be more information produced today online than you would have had in 100 years previously. You're talking about there's like a trillion pieces of content or pieces of information move through the internet on any given day. There's really good information out there. There's nothing that you could want to know about that is not exponentially more knowable today than at any point in humanity. So we should be getting smarter faster. And I do worry that we're often getting dumber quicker. And so somehow we have to flip that, and that's sort of the excellence. If we can help be part of the flipping, that would be a worthy, actually it's a Greek, that'd be a worthy cause for us. So that's sort of a way to tee off anything you guys want to talk about in terms of Donald Trump or in terms of media, running a business. I can guarantee you every question's going to be about Trump, so I won't even say all the things that you do. Yes.
You mentioned China. I'm just curious. You can see them leading in AI. I also feel like there are kids left behind in villages because people are traveling to cities just in search of work. So how are they going to handle AI putting in a population that already doesn't have enough work for its people, putting even more people out of work?
And I don't mean to say that China doesn't have, it has tons of problems, right? I mean, the command and control government has pluses, has minuses. They have, as people get more exposed to technology, as they become more dominant in technology, the more people will realize the repressive nature of the existence outside big cities. So those are real problems for the Chinese regime, but they are putting a hell of a lot of money into these things. They are spreading their tentacles in ways that people aren't paying enough attention to, and it does put them in a position. They're definitely our biggest geopolitical threat long term. I don't think it's close. And so, I think we constantly have to be appraising where do we stand versus the Chinese. And the flip of that is that we do, for all the hangdog, oh man, the world sucks. Life is actually really good right now. I know this is controversial to say, but by almost every single measure, in terms of your health, in terms of access, in terms of information, even in terms of your standard of living. I know that there's definitely pockets of people that are suffering. I don't mean to diminish that, but on whole, things are actually really strong. And the United States is, despite all of our dysfunction, really well positioned to take advantage of globalization and the technological revolution. We really are well positioned. And that if is really important, if we somehow do start to train kids to live in a world where they might have 20 different jobs, and those 20 different jobs might be radically different every 4 or 5 years. If we don't sort of spend our way into paralysis, if we start to think about immigration not as a wedge issue, but how do you get the best and brightest to come and stay here, create businesses, create wealth, and while still protecting our shores. If you get those things right, then we're beautifully positioned. And I think the concern should be that we're not being hardly any of that. For all of the reasons that I think do go back to some of those social media and cable TV dynamics, that tribalism is real. Like, it is getting worse, like people are getting more polarized, and they're getting more threatened by anyone who doesn't share their political view. And so you have Republicans, who most people focus as being extremely tribal. Liberals are extremely tribal. They go to the same news sources, and they watch the same shows, and they're disdainful of anybody who's a conservative. And they're getting pulled further and further to the left. Just in the last year, if you look at where the Democratic Party is on health care, it went from Obamacare being essentially the mainstream theology for the Democratic Party to now, I guarantee you, you cannot become the nominee for the Democratic Party in 2020 without being unequivocally for a single-payer system. That's far to the left of what Obamacare was. He said no to that. He went with something more moderate. And I think you're seeing this play out on immigration. If you just listen to the debate, it really is almost unfettered open borders that you hear liberals talking about, and that's not where the country is, right? So as two sides get pulled into these sort of tribal warfare, and then the echo chamber is real. Like, you're sitting there, if you're just listening to Rachel or watching Sean, and you're going to Huffington Post or you're going to the National Review, and then you're just living in these little bubbles, and then all the algorithms do, I mean, we talk about a lot about Facebook, but all algorithms do is give you more of what you've said you want. That's it. That is like the danger of the algorithm with Google and with Facebook, is it pumps out more of what you want. And so if you want emotionalism on the left, you're going to get a lot more of it. If you want emotionalism on the right, you're going to get a lot more of it. Again, further enhancing and fortifying that bubble. That bubble's dangerous. I guess.
Climate messages are not working, and meanwhile, the planet is arguably the one limited asset that we have. If you were a leader in the climate change movement, and given what you know about media, what advice would you give to tailor a message that it can actually speak to both polarities?
Yeah, I mean, it's another issue to me that is hyper polarized. I mean, on one side, you have an entire party that doesn't acknowledge what virtually every scientist in the world has acknowledged, that they're like, the planet's warming. Like, all I say is, like, just look at the numbers. If 13 out of the 14 previous years are the warmest years in the history of the planet, like, I would just look at that and say, so it seems like the planet is warming. And it also seems like there are some consequences for that. You're starting to see the consequences. But you have one party that says that's not true. You have another party, liberals, who are just saying so much, it's like they come off often as radical in the solution of let's get rid of oil, let's just go to a fully renewable sources of energy, or let's make this fight or that fight. And so the way to talk about it is, I actually think it's an area where, other than elected Republican officials, I do feel like we're coming to a consensus. I see, even if you look at a lot of the polling, I think most Republicans now acknowledge that it is an issue that needs to be tackled. One of the things that people don't pay attention to is even your big oil companies that were deniers in the past, all now acknowledge that it is, and all are actually now starting to invest a hell of a lot of money in alternative fuel sources, and now see a pathway to profit from it. You see companies, you see corporations. One of the other interesting trends over the last 18 months is that corporations that in the past just sat out all political debates because it was too divisive and they just wanted to focus on profit, are now suddenly getting pushed into it. So when you saw the president pull out the global warming treaty, you saw countless businesses, countless CEOs say that's nonsense and say, we're going to take steps unilaterally to help fill that void. Now the question is whether or not we move quick enough to make a big difference on it. Because we can always point the argument that conservatives are going to make is that, well, look, China and India are way worse polluters than we are, and we can only make a small effect on it. Yes, but is that everyone follows our lead. Like, for all of the hoopla and even the angst globally about Donald Trump, we're still the one nation everybody looks to set an example. And that's why being part of these treaties, being part of the movement to make sure that people realize there are pretty dramatic steps that have to take place that can then, I think, have a market effect on slowing global warming. Like, those things will then happen. But I think it is getting people to realize that there is an emerging consensus in the middle, and that action just has to keep happening. And a lot of it has to be driven by the private sector. Yes.
The polarization is obvious. I have a very liberal friend and a very conservative friend. I've never put them together. and NBC, the other Fox, did not look at the other channels. Are there actual statistics that show the reliance on each side? I don't mean between left and right. What percentage of people who watch cable would look at both of those channels to try to get to some reality for themselves?
I mean, one, very few people actually watch cable TV. You're still, even with the surge, and then there has been a much bigger audience in the Trump era, you're still unlikely to often have more than 1 million people at any given time watching either, watching certainly MSNBC and maybe 2 to 3 times that for Fox. So still a relatively small portion of society. But those tend to be the biggest activists. They tend to be the people you don't want to vote with other friends in a room because they have really strong opinions. I think the bigger problem that is the number of people who consume the vast majority of their news on Facebook. Way more. What people don't realize in the last election, we're never going to know if the Russians tipped the election. I will say it is possible they did. And the reason you'll never know, and the reason it's possible that they did, is you only needed to move about 100,000 votes in 3 states and you have a different outcome. People, I think, know that. What they don't know is if you go and look at how did people consume information in the final month of the campaign, 60% of people got almost all of their news on Facebook, through Facebook. So if you go back and what happened on Facebook in the final month of the campaign, 19 of the 20 stories that reached the largest number of people on Facebook were fake. 19 of 20 were fake. And they were very emotional. They were Hillary had an affair with the Pope type stuff. So that's what was pumping. The most fascinating and scary conversation I had recently was with someone I was trying to recruit who spent their life trying to game the algorithm on Facebook. And he said, as someone who had his head in the machine of Facebook trying to study the algorithm, because I wasn't surprised by the outcome, because I saw what was moving the needle on the left and the right. It was so emotional. And anything that talked about Hillary corruption took off so strongly. So did that affect people who voted? I don't know, but if you go look at the polls, one of the reasons that everyone, including myself, would have gotten that election wrong was that an astonishing number of people made up their mind in the last 2 weeks of the campaign. And of those people who made up their mind in the last 2 weeks, it broke decisively for Donald Trump. Decisively for Donald Trump. So you can blame Comey. I think you can pretty accurately blame Hillary Clinton. But definitely something was stirring out there that got it to break. And again, you can't absolve Hillary of guilt because I think even with Comey or the email scandal, most people didn't pay attention to those details. All they knew was when they heard emails, they thought scummy Clintons. I thought 20 years of oh my God, I don't understand this. What the hell they do now? You know what? I don't want them anymore. Vote for Trump. I think there was a whole lot of that happened in the last couple of weeks of the election. And so we won't know. I mean, we're going to have a Mueller report. We're going to know more and more about the activity. The truth is we'll never know. It's an unknown vote. Yes?
Mike's kind of a follow-up on that, and I'm not a big Disney person, but I do believe in the power of the hidden Mickeys, and I think there are a lot of hidden Mickeys in the little places that you don't see where the footprints are of the Russian influence.
Right.
And where do you see those? Because we get so focused on the investigation and the denials and the this and the that, I think that sometimes the underlying stuff gets lost. What would be the...
I mean, one of the underlying things is you can go on Facebook and manipulate voters. Facebook has these amazing tools that allows you to target people with amazing precision, not down to an individual, but down to an individual type. If you want to find a gun-owning rural voter in Michigan and target a message to them, you can do it and it doesn't cost that much. That's the scandal. The Russians didn't pay that much for their activity on Facebook. It was actually the stuff that was being done, it just spread organically because people then tend to share stuff that's emotional. That's the part that they gained. There's a couple rubles that they actually tossed it onto Facebook. And so I think that is definitely one. I still don't know, and for all the people we talk to and all the time we spend reading about it, I don't know if there was collusion between Donald Trump and the Russians. I have no idea. I've not seen any certain proof that Donald Trump knew of any of the activities that were taking place with people below him and the Russians. What I do know, I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin. I always think of if there's 12 people sitting in a bar where they say come on. The thing that they would say come on to is that nobody in politics would take a meeting with the Russians. Until this election, nobody, he would not. That happened. He reported to the FBI. He takes the boss and says, oh my God, I get your email. Trump's son gets an email that says, man, I've got from a shady Russian saying, I've got the goods on Hillary Clinton. He took the meeting. The entire brain trust of the campaign sat in on the meeting. And then the part that the 12 people at the bar was saying, come on, is when they then had to file for meetings you've had with Russians, they somehow forgot it. Have you ever seen pictures of that motley crew of Russians? There's no way he would. They forget that they're Russians and everyone thinks they're buying their election. You would not forget that group of people. And there's too many of those instances that are not really fishy. Jared Kushner, you know that the entire world wants to say that you're in cahoots with the Russians, and you're still taking meetings with people affiliated with Vladimir Putin during the transition, and then you again forget to put that on your form. It just doesn't pass the smell test. And so I don't know what Mueller will find. I do think the Mueller report will be the most interesting read probably of our lifetime, because he's going to pull together all the threads that we've been talking about here. He's also investigating what happened on Facebook. He's going to look at how susceptible we are to manipulation on social platforms. He's going to look at all of those ties. He's looking at why, if you just read the language, no matter what Donald Trump says about you can only look at stuff between me and the Russians, you can't look at my financial dealings. That's actually not how the statute's written. He can look at whatever he wants associated with that. Which means, yes, he's digging through his bank records, and he was in real estate, and it was Donald Trump. It's hard to see that there aren't threads that he's pulling at that don't scare the hell out of the president. With all that said, it still could be he sees all of that and says, you know what, I don't feel like I have enough, or I could recommend the indictment of a sitting president. I don't know. I think if he does it on obstruction of justice, just based on what's publicly known, he's already got an airtight case on obstruction if he wants to make the case that with the firing of James Comey and the activity around that, in an effort to protect Michael Flynn, that he talked to the FBI. In fact, there wasn't anybody Donald Trump talked to in that 2-month period where he didn't tell them to back off. That was not a hard one to prove. Will Mueller go for it? Yeah, I don't think he will bring any charge unless he's 100% certain that it's airtight and that they win a case or that would lead to impeachment. And I think that's why this thing is not over tomorrow. It's going to be a long, we can drag into next year. I mean, it's going to be a long, methodical process. All I know is I would not want Robert Mueller and the 17 killers that he hired on his legal team to do myself.
Could you, with all this revolution in technology and tremendous increase in information, so much of this information is free.
Yeah.
So could you just talk for a minute about the challenges of news organization, yours and others, to generate revenue and generate a profit, given the fact that so much of what you're competing against is out there free?
It's a really hard business. It really is. I mean, we were raising money to do X's. It's probably the worst pitch ever for venture funds. I said, listen, if you're trying to guarantee yourself the highest possible return on your investment, you should not be talking to me. I think we're as good as out there in terms of running media companies and knowing how to turn them into profitable businesses. But it's really hard. I mean, it's much easier to start a technology company or a software company or it's a healthcare company, because your chances for profitability are a lot higher. The only ways you can make money in the media right now are advertising, subscription, sponsorship, and maybe if you can sell products or whatever based on the brand that you build. We're lucky that we've been really good at figuring out a certain ad market where we're able to generate a lot of ad revenue. We'll ultimately add a subscription dimension to it because I think any healthy media company has to have both ends. But there is a mass amount of competition. I mean, there's way too much competition right now in media because anybody who has money wants to be affiliated with a media company. It's interesting. People want to talk to you. They want on TV. It's fun. It's interesting business, but it's created way too much supply. Way too much supply. And what people don't realize is this year, every new ad dollar that's going to be spent on all media, 90% of it goes to Facebook and Google. So every other media company is fighting over 10% of the pie. They are monopolies like the world has never seen. I mean, Facebook reaches billions of people with mass amounts of engagement, And they have technology that no media company can ever replicate. If they want to sell you a pair of shoes, they're following you. They follow your cookies just like anyone else. And they know what type of shoe you want to buy, when you want to buy it, when you're looking for it. So what better machine to sell you advertising than them? So it is a big challenge for media. And it's an interesting enough challenge that we go to war to try to do it 2 times over. And it can be done if you build a product that people value, that they have to come to and trust each and every day. That's a good business. Most of the media companies that have gone out of business, I think have just made bad business assumption, which is let's just go for scale. Let's just try to get as many clicks as we can, which invariably leads you to produce a bunch of crap, basically, like really lowest common denominator garbage, which gives you a sugar high in the short term, but it's not actually a business. So we always focus on how many people can we get reading us day in and day out. What type of people are those? Who wants to advertise against it? Then you can build a business. But there's no doubt it's a tough business, and it's one that we spend a lot of time thinking about sort of the demise of print newspapers. But what happened in newspapers is now happening to TV. They're going through the exact same thing. TV, as you know it, will not be TV 10 years from now. It's possible we don't have the big networks. It's possible everyone goes to having their own smaller bundle that is delivered from a Netflix or an HBO or a Hulu or a whatever's next, or an Amazon or an Apple, and not the traditional way that you're getting it. And we're not all going to buy big packages. We're probably, most people under the age of 30 either don't even have a cable package or they just pay for an individual station that they're interested in. So that, I don't know what that leads to, other than at a very high end, it leads to a lot of consolidation because there's a lot of confusion, which is why you have mergers right now going on, whether it's your Time Warners, your AT&Ts, your Verizon, your CBSs, your Viacoms. They're all going to basically try to consolidate because they have to have enough people consuming their products to be able to go to the market and compete against Facebook and Google. And hoping that Facebook is benevolent and gives you shares revenue is a stupid strategy. And then assuming that government will regulate these companies, they will eventually, they're not going to in the short term. And so for all the scrutiny they're getting, they're continuing to grow. They're hugely profitable entities. They're sitting on vast amounts of cash. I mean, Apple's got literally like tens of billions of dollars just sitting there. Just sitting there. They have enough money to buy 3 or 4 of the biggest companies in the world right now with just their cash reserves. So these companies are just at such a competitive advantage. And for all the talk about clamping down on some of these mergers, there's very little of that actually happening. Yes, sir.
So it was an early adopter of your emails, and when you guys moved to Politico, when you created Axios, love your model. Like it's, in the way, what I tell people is, I don't like to have my time wasted, and Axios doesn't waste my time because it gives me what I need very quickly, as opposed to Post 202, which is very long. I get it.
Right.
I get it the same way. Can you give us a peek under the hood? The thing that I don't think that you get a lot of credit for is the amount of editing that you go through, the editorial aspect of deciding what you want to put out there and what you're trying to communicate. And I think that I frankly think it's top notch. Can you just give us a peek under the hood about how you get to that point?
We hired him a couple weeks ago. I mean, the truth is, it's a lot harder to be short and simple than it is to be long.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of editing that goes into that. And basically the peek under the hood is, we sat there for years and looked at the data. And usually you look at the data with like your own biases, like I'm a reporter, I write 1,500 word stories, because that's what an important reporter does. Well, I looked at all of the data, and this actually started 3 or 4 years ago. I was writing a column with Mike Allen. We had 2 or 3 columns in a row that were huge, like the President Obama had to react to them. Everyone was talking about them, we're on TV. And so I went and I looked at the traffic numbers. Like how did people read those stories? And this is back when you'd have to like click to go to additional pages to read the full thing. It was a really humbling moment. It turned out that 81% of people quit reading after the first page. So that means that at most 19% of people read 486 words. So then we went and looked at technologies that can tell you how long you're hovering in a different place on a page. It turns out that in almost every case, no matter what you say, you're not reading. You're basically reading 1 or 2 paragraphs, and then you're leaving. And so you could say, well, that sucks, I give up on humanity. Or you could say, well, wait a second, maybe the consumer's right. Maybe you can actually give people the gist and the importance by just telling them what is the one thing in that story that you have hidden that's actually real and new, and then tell them why it matters. And that is the entire architecture of everything that we do. To do that, you have to hire people who have subject matter expertise. And so whether it's Sarah Fisher, who does media for us, or Jonathan Swan, who does politics, or Kim Hart, who does tech policy, or Ina Fried in the Valley, who does sort of the big tech companies. They've all been covering these beats for years, and they have true expertise, so they can actually tell you, based on their experience, why it matters. They can tell you what's new. And so that's the whole, that is the genesis of the company. Now it's obviously expanded into more areas, got bigger, but it fundamentally sticks true to that. And it really is down to, like, I become a big believer in design, and it goes to your thing. The one thing I'm certain of is that people are hit with more information than they're capable of consuming, and they don't know what to trust. So if you can actually engineer something to save them time, because what you said is exactly what we want you to say. And then we did a focus group, and maybe 3 or 4 months in, we sent out to our readers, you can respond and give us some input. 11,000 people responded, and it took at least 10 minutes to do it. And I went and read the comments that they wrote, and it was at that point where I'm like, holy cow, we're really on to something. Because it was like people were sitting in our meeting, they're like, you're making me smarter faster, you're saving me time, you're being respectful of me. And so that was a big aha moment. And then over the last couple months, I've gotten probably 100, 200 emails from people just saying thank you. When I was in political for a decade, no one ever thanked me. They never thanked you. But I was like, well, why are they thanking us now? This is a great company. This is a great company. It's because they're like, you're saving me time. Like, I'm overwhelmed. I'm frazzled. I have this big stack of books I keep promising to read that I'm never going to read because I'm a prisoner to the tyranny of information. But you're liberating me from that. And I do think to get to that information nirvana I talked about earlier, you have to be liberated from that. There is a lot of news consumption, information consumption that could be done a lot more efficiently. If we can check that box, then you'll actually have time to read the magazine or the book or spend time with your family, maybe talking. Not like it. But I think that's what we have to get to. And my hope is that collectively we do get there. But like right now, people are they're paralyzed. And by the way, it's not when we talk to CEOs, there's no difference between Jamie Dimon and Redirect. It's like they're suffering from the exact same thing. Overwhelmed, don't know what to trust, need to be smarter across more topics at a time of greater change. How do you solve for that? This is why this project is a big project. It'll last a long time because it's going to take a while to solve for it.
What trends do you see emerging in digital media over the next couple of years?
I think there'll be a ton of consolidation. I think people are no doubt, all the stuff you read about people gravitating towards video, people definitely want video. You definitely have an entire generation that's being brought up, not even on Facebook, anyone under the age of 30, the numbers for Facebook are atrocious. They're being brought up on sort of a short attention span way of consuming information. And I don't even say that personally, I say it like my kids are hyper informed, and they might be hyper-informed on Snapchat. There's some good content on Snapchat. I think that's a big one. I think there's going to be a big war for like how do we regain the trust of the consumer? Like what can you trust? And hopefully there's a big push by everyone just to behave better on Twitter for reporters. Maybe they're not, like to check your opinion at home and try to focus on just informing people. I think that is a trend. You don't see it yet. It's going to have to happen. That there's not been great. We're basically becoming global. Like, no matter what the politics are at the moment, you can't stop globalization. All economies are going to be like interconnected in massive ways, and you can't stop that. You can lament it. You can't stop it. There's not actually a lot of media yet that does a good job of connecting the dots between what's happening in other countries or the big trends over there and how do they affect us. Because the world is small. I think we have a tendency to think like, oh, we're special. Like, look at, like, we've got Donald Trump and we've got populism, we've got these weird immigration debates. If you go travel to Britain, if you go to Germany, if you go to Italy, it's no different. It's the exact same debates. And every country is basically being disrupted by those trends, by technology, changing things in a big way, by immigration here, migration in Europe. And then a rise of populism that flows from that. And that it's no different in those countries. It's a reason that Angela Merkel is actually vulnerable for the first time in Germany, because you see the same populist currents. And by the way, those populist currents flow from the same human instincts. Like the big difference in politics there and here is we've shifted. For the longest time, basically our politics was defined by Republicans want less government, Democrats want more government. As we've seen in the last couple of years, like Democrats are spending Republicans are spending like liberals. So that's not what animates them. The fundamental animating force is change. Do you like a world that is more multicultural? Do you like a world that is more interconnected globally? Do you like a world that doesn't look like the one you were actually promised as a kid? Tell me the answers to that, and I'll tell you what party you belong to. And that's what fuels Donald Trump. There's a huge segment of this country that feels, in some cases rightly so, that this isn't what I grew up. This is not what I thought was going to happen. I never thought that these were the social values that I would have to live by. I never thought that there'd be this much change in the type of people that are around me, of the ethnicity of the people that are around me. I never thought there'd be this much skepticism about me having a religious faith. I never thought that if I had questions about gay marriage that I was a bigot, given that Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton had those exact same questions only a couple of years ago. I never thought that people would question patriotism in the way that they are in reaction to wars we probably should have had. But those are the animating things. And that's why Donald Trump is more popular, or as popular today, as he was when he won. You turn on some of the TV, you would think like, oh, Trump's going to be run out of business, he's going to be run out of town, he's tanking. No, the people that were with him then are with him today. He's never going below 35%. You can take that to the bank. He has tested it. He has tested every single group other than straight, white, Christian, married men. And his numbers never go below 35. Those people are cheering him on. They feel like he's doing what he said he was going to do. When they see us in the media whine, they say, we wanted you to whine. When they see Democrats say, oh my gosh, we don't want this type of change, they wanted that type of change. That's not going away. And by the way, he can win re-election. I think everyone just assumes he's either getting impeached or run again. He will run again, and he could win again. Because those forces are true. That grievance, that energy that people feel. And if someone had been sane, there's not many of us left that are sane. If someone had been sane, and you just said, you know what, I'm gonna do a blackout. I'm not doing any media at all. I'm not gonna look at anything. I'm not gonna look at Twitter. I'm not gonna look at cable. And you just woke up this morning, and you didn't listen to what he says. You didn't read what he tweets. And then you looked at the last year, or last 54 weeks, or whatever it is, you'd be like, this could have been President Pence. It's like it's a Paul Ryan tax cut, Gorsuch on the court, any conservative would have put in there. The regulations they got rid of, any Republican would have gotten rid of them. Like it's not that radical, other than the words, and the words have massive consequences. In terms of things that have actually been done, not that much has actually gotten done. Not that much is outside the ordinary. There hasn't been trade wars that he promised. Yes, he's been a little tougher rhetorically on immigration in some cases, on some deportations, but it's not been as radical as you would think he wants to be. And so for those people, they look and they're like, I don't know, the stock market seems like it's up a lot higher today than it was before. It seems like unemployment rate is down. It seems like those companies, I hear from some company that's either bringing back money from overseas or starting to create jobs and promote it here. So by a lot of indicators, those people can like, I don't understand the hysteria. Like, what are you people all worked up about? I know what they're worked up about. I often get worked up about it.
How is social media affecting reporters you work with? I mean, 15 years ago, somebody's upset with a story, a press secretary calls a reporter. Now they have to kind of jump in the weeds on Twitter and defend a lot of what they write. It's got to kind of affect them in terms of how they report the news.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who runs a media company, I hate Twitter. I really do. I think it's destroyed part of the heart and soul of journalism.
Yeah.
Largely because for whatever perverse reason, reporters who, I mean, I worked for a long time at the Post and at the Journal and at Roll Call, and a lot of reporters are my friends. I studied the industry. Until Twitter, most people kept their opinions to themselves. Like, are most reporters liberal? Undoubtedly liberal, by 90%, 95%, in my experience. But I often thought, until recently, I was always a big defender of the press, and I was like, listen, yes, they're liberal, but they're guilty about that, and they're constantly overcompensating for it. So the end result is that most coverage is relatively fair. I never thought that there was that much bias as conservatives would allege. I would say in the last couple of years, certainly in the Trump years, there's a tremendous amount of bias. And particularly on Twitter, we have all these reporters who are paid to just report the facts and figure out what's going on, like popping off like a Rachel Maddow. That's not their job. They should pick a different job if that's what they want to do. And so anybody whose trust you're trying to win, and they're looking at those Twitter feeds, and they're like, wait, I thought I'm supposed to trust that person, yet they're trashing Trump and Trump voters each and every day on Twitter. I think that's really dangerous. There's obviously upsides to it. You have more communication with your reader, you get more feedback, there's more transparency, but I hate that part of it. So we have a policy at our company, not just for the editorial side, but also the business side, that like part of the cost of admission is I don't want to hear your opinion on social media. Like, we have to try to earn back the trust of readers. And like what I always say is like, I think you're interesting and I think you're smart, but like your opinion isn't going to move anybody. Like what moves people are facts, or the really good reporting, or like earning people's trust and then telling hard truths. Like that's where you, I think, start to win this war, not by unleashing your own opinion. So, and then I'm probably an outlier on that.
You do that very tentatively. You don't know what I'm going to ask.
I'm ready for you.
But it was just occurred to me about the independence of reporters. I think you guys are doing a fabulous job. So it's nice to hear that that's kind of a policy. And to Dak's point about saving time, if anybody in this room is not reading Axios AM, do yourself a favor, go sign up for it today. It's fantastic. I get it every morning, you're like, boom, you know what's going on. Is there a video outlet for Mike Allen? I mean, is there a place where you can watch his interviews? Because after yesterday, watching him interview.
Oh, same interviews, yeah. Not that one. But like today,
yeah.
Today we're doing he's interviewing Mike Pence. So like, we are very tough on the White House, but we have great access in there. We're able to tell people what's going on. We're interviewing Pence today. I don't think they love our coverage. But I think they would say like we're trying to figure out what's going on. We're trying to explain it. I think we explain the absurdity when it's really absurd, but we also, like if something gets done and it was accomplished and it was legitimate, like you got to point that out too. And it's a fascinating White House to cover. I mean, there'll be, without exaggeration, there'll be more interesting play-by-play leaking today than there would have been in 8 years of Bush or Obama. It's crazy. Like, your visibility is insane. Everybody leaks. Everybody. Whereas nobody did in Bush, in Obama. Nobody. I hated the White House. Because everyone is just, they're such a true believer, and like, oh no, you should have seen how resolute Bush was, how smart and thoughtful Obama was. And like, no, yeah, but like, who was fighting the who? But with this, it's like, it's constant. Everybody wants to talk, everybody wants to trash each other. You end up as a reporter being like part reporter, and I'd say mainly therapist. They want someone to talk to because they're like in this carnival, and they're like, oh my God. A lifeline to sanity, so they're like, they want to talk to reporters and say, this is what's happening. Oh my God, you won't believe what he just did now. And the thing is, like, Trump doesn't care. Like, the only thing he said early on to his staff, and I think he really sees it this way, he said, treat every day like it's an episode of a show. Like, we want to, and he always wants the show to be about Trump. So as long as you don't overshadow him, you're fine. But it's what killed Steve Bannon. What killed Steve Bannon was that Time magazine cover. Like, Donald Trump is the only person in America who still cares what's on the cover of Time magazine. And when Bannon was on there as being like the puppet master, he was dead to Trump. And that's the one unforgivable sin. Everything else is negotiable. And even in season 3, I think Bannon will be back.
That's the prediction of the day.
He'll be back. You got to remember, Trump's world is really small. Like, I think one of the most interesting things about him is that he does not have many authentic relationships. He has like an authentic relationship with Ivanka. He has an authentic relationship with Hope. Sort of Hope is almost like an adopted daughter. He has a relationship with Jared. He has a frosty relationship with Melania. Outside of that, he doesn't have many friends. He has people he shoots the bull. He doesn't have that many people that he's close to. And so there's not, whenever people are always talking about, oh, someone should tell him the truth, there's no one who really can. He doesn't, one, he's not seeking it out, but like there's not many people who have that relationship with him. There's not many people that he turns to for advice, which I think makes his existence lonely. He's the only, I mean, I really do think I think he likes it more now. I think he really disliked being president. Like, he's probably the only person who could win the presidency who thinks that his other plane was nicer than the new one. And then his new digs are a dump. Right? Because he didn't just live this, like, do whatever you want life, and now it's very confined. That's where the tension often comes in with Kelly. Is that Kelly is such a military man. He has restored some order internally, but he's also sort of cut a deal with Trump that, like, when you're not here, I don't care what you do. Like, I'm not going to complain when you're on Twitter. If you're going to have executive time from 6 a.m. to 11 and play on Fox and tweet and be mischievous, I'll be mischievous. But when you're in the office, like, I'm going to control who sees you, what type of information you get, and how we respond to it.
Jim, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning. It's always a great day to be able to start the morning in such a provocative way. And I sat listening to the remarks, and in my mind, I'm thinking, wow, he's putting a lot on the table. I mean, at the heart of it, he certainly injected a lot of humor to help us sort of process this. But the reality of what faces our children and our future as we really deliberate on some of the issues he articulated, you know, it makes you ponder. And so, as the president and CEO of the Campagna Center, we do have the great responsibility of being mindful of the children, youth, and families that we are serving, helping to support them from an education and social development perspective. We've been doing this work for 73 years, starting this year. Cradle to Career education and social development programs that happen across the city, all designed to help support kids to be successful in school and life. And so we have annual reports here. I invite you to take one. One of the things I thought about mentioning specifically, given the business audience that tends to come out for these particular events, is We are recruiting businesses to be a part of an externship program for our Building Better Futures work. I think that's a really important opportunity to help connect young people with the way the world of work is changing. We don't have a template and a roadmap. Helping our young people prepare today for the way in which the world of work is changing tomorrow is really very, very important. So if you are interested in wanting to learn a little bit more about that, I would love to talk with you. It's a one-week experience during spring break in the summer, and it really opens the minds of young people around what they have to be prepared for. It's not like it was 30 years ago when I left and left home and got to college, and you sort of think you're on one path. The world is changing, and we have to help our young people be prepared for that. So thank you for starting your morning with us. Enjoy your day. Happy Valentine's Day. We're here.
Thank you. We really appreciate your support and look forward to seeing you in May.
Absolutely.